Observe now a land once cloaked in the sheen of technology, concrete ambitions, and relentless might. The 77th year of the Israeli state was meant to mark a celebration, a triumph of survival and supremacy. But what unfolded instead was a seismic reversal, one carved not by time, but by a single, calculated strike. It came without fanfare, silent wings guiding fire, perhaps a whisper of code in a digital system. In one night, Iran's calculated blow pierced the illusion of invincibility. Anti-air systems, praised for decades, faltered. The sky turned red, steel fell, stone cracked. The world watched as the great fortress faltered. This was not merely an attack, it was a watershed moment, reshaping the psychological and symbolic dimensions of the Middle East conflict, and challenging long-held strategic doctrines. The unprecedented blow, a strategic reversal. The creation of Israel in 1948 marked the birth of a nation forged by conflict and in relentless pursuit of security. Over 77 years, Israel evolved into one of the most advanced military and technological powers in the region, projecting an image of impenetrable defense through its Iron Dome, precision surveillance, robust cyber capabilities, and formidable intelligence networks. It presented itself as a fortress against hostile neighbors, particularly Iran, which it viewed as an existential threat. Yet, beneath this surface of strength, a certain overconfidence began to build, with cities growing vertically and systems relying heavily on technological shields, often prioritizing deterrence over diplomatic solutions. The 77th year was anticipated as a moment of symbolic affirmation, proof that despite regional instability, Israel stood firm, modern, and untouchable. That illusion shattered in one decisive moment. A well-coordinated Iranian strike, utilizing either advanced drone swarms, hypersonic missiles, or a hybrid of kinetic and cyber attacks, slipped through the cracks of Israel's defenses. Systems long lauded for protecting Israeli airspace hesitated or outright failed. Within minutes, symbols of Israeli power, air bases, communication towers, energy grids, collapsed. Civilian infrastructure took unexpected hits, and entire neighborhoods were turned to rubble. The impact went beyond physical damage, it struck deep into the national psyche, revealing that even the most fortified nations can be fundamentally blindsided. This singular blow reversed the direction of fear, exposing Israel, the symbol of endurance and control, as suddenly fragile. It was not merely a military failure, it was a profound transformation of perception. A disturbing symmetry, shifting narratives and global reckoning. In the immediate aftermath of the Iranian strike, a disturbing visual symmetry began to emerge between Israeli cities and Gaza, two regions historically defined by vastly different realities of power and suffering. Images from Tel Aviv and Ashdod, with streets lined with debris, collapsed buildings, and smoke rising from residential areas, bore an uncanny resemblance to the war-torn neighborhoods of Gaza that the world had grown accustomed to seeing. This was not merely a coincidence of destruction, but a deeper reflection of a shifting moral and geopolitical narrative. Areas in southern and central Israel experienced conditions long attributed to Gaza, loss of electricity, water shortages, overwhelmed hospitals, and large-scale displacement. Israeli civilians were now the ones fleeing, huddling in shelters, and relying on emergency aid. For a nation accustomed to strategic dominance, this role reversal struck with jarring force. International headlines that once focused on the aftermath of Israeli airstrikes in Gaza were now describing similar crises inside Israel. Aid organizations that had long operated exclusively in Gaza began deploying resources within Israel. The visuals created an uncomfortable parallel, challenging long-standing narratives of who suffers, who survives, and who holds power in the region. Critics and analysts openly questioned whether the suffering now visible in Israel would open space for empathy toward those who had endured similar or worse conditions for years in Gaza. This moment forced a confrontation with uncomfortable truths, blurring the lines between occupier and occupied, and exposing the fragility of all human systems when confronted with the full force of war. The narrative shift was profound. The world, for a moment, looked at Israel not as a superpower in a conflict zone, but as a victim of sudden, calculated destruction. The moral irony and strategic crossroads. The aftermath of the Iranian strike revealed a profound moral irony. For years, Israel had operated from a position of overwhelming strength, justifying its actions as defensive necessity. Yet, in a single moment, the state that once symbolized strategic superiority found itself immersed in the very conditions it had inflicted on others. Its leadership, once unwavering in its rhetoric about deterrence and strength, now spoke with urgency about vulnerability and victimhood. This shift exposed a perceived hypocrisy for many observers, particularly in the global south and parts of the Arab world, as nations that had previously defended Israeli actions now grappled with images of Israeli suffering that mirrored those they had long dismissed or minimized in Palestinian territories. This moral reversal resonated beyond the region, inviting renewed reflection on the principle of reciprocity in human empathy. In the wake of this unprecedented strike, the region stood at a fragile and uncertain crossroads. With infrastructure in disrepair, morale shaken, and the world's attention intensely focused on its response, Israel faced a critical choice between two divergent paths. The first was the familiar route of retaliation, a swift and powerful counterstrike intended to restore deterrence and reassert dominance. This option, deeply embedded in Israel's political DNA, promised the illusion of regained control but risked plunging the region into an even more catastrophic cycle of violence. The second path, however, was less certain, more fragile, but potentially transformative, a moment of introspection where shared suffering could open the door to a long-overdue reckoning with past actions and future possibilities. The question now ripples across the region: will this devastation lead to reflection, to justice, to a shared humanity, or will it ignite another storm, a darker, more furious cycle of vengeance? The future remains unwritten, dependent not on weapons, but on choices. Concluding remarks, reflective and forward-looking. The Iranian strike marked a watershed moment, not just in the military history of the region, but in the psychological and symbolic dimensions of the Middle East conflict. It changed the rhythm of the region, setting in motion a new chapter in which roles, expectations, and power balances were no longer predictable or one-sided. As the dust continues to settle, the world watches with bated breath. This comprehensive analysis is based on in-depth research and expert commentary from DW News, providing critical insights into this ongoing, transformative situation. Thank you for engaging with us on this powerful journey of history, pain, and evolving perspectives. Stay informed, stay analytical. Conclusion 4: Global Insights and Wisdom. As we conclude our in-depth analysis, it's clear that the recent Iranian strike on Israel marks far more than a singular military event. It is a watershed moment in the geopolitical landscape of the Middle East, fundamentally challenging long-held strategic doctrines and forcing a re-evaluation of power dynamics. For decades, Israel's image of invincibility and strategic superiority has been a cornerstone of regional stability, at least from one perspective. Yet, in one decisive night, that illusion was pierced. This strike showcased a significant evolution in Iranian capabilities, whether through advanced drone swarms, hypersonic missiles, or a sophisticated hybrid attack, demonstrating a level of precision, coordination, and impact previously unseen. The consequences extend beyond the immediate physical damage. This event has profoundly shifted perception, both domestically within Israel and internationally. For the first time in decades, Israeli civilians experienced a level of terror and unpredictability that had largely been confined to other conflict zones. This shared vulnerability, regardless of historical context, is a new, uncomfortable reality. Internationally, the narrative has begun to shift. Media outlets, accustomed to framing Israel as a dominant force, now report on its cities in ruins and its emergency services overwhelmed, leading to unprecedented comparisons and raising questions about moral equivalence and the long-term consequences of conflict. What stands before the region now is a precarious crossroads. Israel faces a critical choice: the familiar path of retaliation, which risks spiraling into an even wider, more catastrophic regional conflict, or a more transformative path of introspection, where the shared experience of devastation could potentially open doors to new dialogues and a reckoning with past actions. The future of the Middle East, indeed, the ripple effect on global stability, hinges on this decision. Will the devastating symmetry of suffering witnessed in this moment lead to a fundamental reevaluation of strategies and a push towards a more equitable and sustainable vision for peace, or will it simply fuel a deeper, more furious cycle of vengeance? This incident serves as a stark reminder that in our interconnected world, no nation, however fortified, is immune to the direct consequences of escalating regional tensions. The dynamics have changed. The rhythm of the region has been altered. As the dust continues to settle, the world watches, recognizing that the choices made in the coming days will not only redefine the Middle East but will undoubtedly resonate globally. We at Global Insights and Wisdom remain committed to bringing you the most in-depth and analytical perspectives on these critical geopolitical shifts. Stay informed, stay analytical, and join us as we continue to dissect the complex layers of our evolving world.